Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, November 22nd. This is Africa 54.
Deposed Sudanese Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok signs an agreement with military coup leaders to be reinstated as protesters clash with police in Sudan's capital of Khartoum. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expresses deep concern for Mali and Ethiopia. And Europeans protest as surging COVID cases prompt tighter restrictions.
Sudan's coup leaders on Sunday reinstated Sudan's civilian Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok. However, some pro-democracy groups are accusing Hamdok of selling out the revolution by signing an agreement with the military. But Hamdok said on Monday that maintaining the economic gains from the past 2 years was among the reasons he decided to return to his post under a deal with the military nearly a month after he was removed in a coup. In an interview with Reuters at his residence in Khartoum, Hamdok said he believed a technocratic government he is expected to appoint would have a chance to improve living standards. Lucy Fielder has more.
Sudan's military may have reinstated its civilian prime minister, but that didn't keep pro-democracy protesters from the streets. Nearly a month of unrest has seen dozens of people killed. On Sunday, military leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan signed an agreement to restore Abdalla Hamdok as the head of a transitional civilian government of technocrats and promised to release all political detainees. But as the deal was announced, demonstrators in Khartoum chanted that Hamdok had sold the revolution. Pro-democracy groups have been demanding full civilian rule since the ouster of longtime leader Omar al-Bashir in 2019. And protesters like Shahinaz Gamal want the military completely excluded from the political process.
We are marching towards the presidential palace to reject what is happening. Up ahead, we can hear the sound of tear gas and bullets. So we will continue resisting, and we will not settle down until all militia groups are dissolved and until we completely exclude the military from the political process.
Tens of thousands took part in scheduled protests in the capital and twin cities Omdurman and Bahri. Witnesses said security forces fired bullets and tear gas. But Hamdok's reinstatement has been welcomed by the likes of the United States, Britain, the European Union and the United Nations. Western powers had condemned the October 25th coup, in which Hamdok was placed under house arrest, and suspended support for the economically struggling country. Hamdok said on Sunday he had agreed to the deal to prevent more casualties. Burhan says the new agreement will be inclusive, though it made no mention of the Forces of Freedom and Change. That is the civilian coalition that shared power with the military before the coup. The FFC said it did not recognise any agreement with the military.
Lucy Field of Reuters filed that report. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the weekend expressed deep concern during a visit to Dakar, Senegal, for the stability of neighboring Mali and violence in Ethiopia. Conway G. Gittens has more on Blinken's final stop in Africa.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrapped up his trip to the African continent on Saturday. During his final stop in Senegal's capital, Dakar, Blinken expressed deep concern for the stability of neighboring country Mali, which has experienced 2 coups in 18 months. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, the region's main political and economic bloc, imposed sanctions on Mali's transitional leaders earlier this month after plans for presidential and legislative elections were abandoned. Blinken said the U.S., France, and partners in Africa want to see those elections happen and Mali return to constitutional rule through democratic elections.
That's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking to. And this is ultimately about the people of Mali and their aspirations for democracy, their aspirations for peace, their aspirations for development. and respect for human rights. And we look forward to taking the necessary steps to resume the full array of assistance as soon as this democratically elected government has taken office.
Blinken also used the last leg of the tour to express concerns over the ongoing hostilities in Ethiopia.
We continue to push for an immediate end to hostilities without preconditions and humanitarian access for the millions of people in northern Ethiopia who need life-saving aid. And we continue to urge Americans to avail themselves of commercial flights out of the country, and we're providing assistance to them to do so.
Blinken's visit to Africa also included talks in Kenya and Nigeria.
That was Conway G. Gittens of Reuters reporting. The U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of the Foreign Assets Control recently announced it had imposed new sanctions on the Eritrean Defense Force and the ruling political party, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice. The U.S. says it is targeting Eritrea for its role in the year-long war in neighboring northern Ethiopia. Eritrea's foreign ministry slammed the sanctions, saying they are meant to destabilize the country. For more on the effects of these sanctions, I'm joined live via Skype from Washington, D.C. by Johanna Leblanc, national security law and foreign policy expert. Johanna, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Eritrea is already claiming the sanctions are meant to destabilize the country. How effective do you think these sanctions will go to keep Eritrea out of Ethiopia's internal conflict?
Well, as a result of this sanction, what will happen is that Eritrea will not be eligible for foreign assistance from the United States when it comes to its military. So what I will anticipate will happen is that more than likely you will have some members of Congress to introduce legislation amendment through the appropriations bill to ensure that Eritrea does not have access to U.S. Financial assistance for the purpose of its military. Now, Eritrea, which already needs assistance in strengthening its military to protect its borders and its nation from terrorist threats, is now faced with a hard decision in terms of who will Eritrea lean to as a state to ensure and secure financial assistance for its military and also training of its military personnel. So it's rather unfortunate, but unfortunately the U.S. deemed that the acts of Eritrea's military forces undermine its national security as well as strategic interest in the region and in the country.
So what do we know specifically about the two individuals mentioned in this announcement? What is their involvement in this conflict?
Well, their involvement is that they have leadership within Eritrea's armed forces. And the U.S. believes that those two individuals have played a key role in promoting the situation between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and also violating human rights and so forth. So they've been targeted. And while it's unfortunate, I think that it's a good thing that the United States did not sanction the entire country. I always push for targeted sanctions versus sanctions on the whole country, because we know what happens in those cases. It usually just impact some of the most vulnerable in these various societies. So in this case, targeting two individuals versus the entire country is, while unfortunate, it's a good step in the right direction.
Now, Johanna, do we have any specific information on the two businesses mentioned in this announcement by the Treasury Department, the Hydri Trust and the Red Sea Trading Corporation? What kind of support are they giving in this conflict?
Well, the United States, again, alleges that those entities and individuals are supporting the supposedly war, civil war in Ethiopia by providing weapons, by providing support, assistance, and by encouraging the engagement of in Ethiopia's internal affairs. That's what the United States alleges at this time.
Now, we've seen the United States impose sanctions on other countries for various reasons, including other, Western countries, depending on what the issues are. Generally, how do sanctions work? How effective are they?
Sanctions can be effective and sometimes not so effective. Sanctions are usually imposed, as I said earlier, when the national security interest or the strategic interest of the United States is compromised or perceived to be compromised in the future. Sometimes you have targeted sanctions, you have economic sanctions, you have diplomatic sanctions, you have a host of sanctions. And with those sanctions, sometimes what happens is that visas are canceled, obviously. If you have assets in the United States, those assets are often frozen. If you have houses, you may not have access to those property any longer. And how it happens is that usually the office of the president is responsible for making the decision. Now you can have the United States Congress, the State Department, and other entities to make recommendations, but ultimately it is the United States president, and then those sanctions are enforced by the U.S. Treasury Department to make sure that perpetrators are indeed held accountable. When I believe sanctions are not effective, when they target countries and economies that are already struggling, that are already crippled due to various reasons. So I am a proponent for individual and targeted sanctions because I think that actual perpetrators of these violations should be addressed, not society's most vulnerable. That should be penalized for the actions of those individuals.
Johanna, thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you.
Johanna Leblanc is a national security law and foreign policy expert. She joined us from Washington, D.C. After a century and a half hidden away in luxurious private collections and displayed in grand European museums, 13 stolen Ethiopian artifacts have finally returned home following months of private negotiations. The items are part of the largest act of restitution in Ethiopia's history, according to officials. These particular artifacts were taken in 1868 following the Battle of Magdala between the British and Ethiopian empires. Some of the objects had been offered in an auction by a private seller in Britain this June. Officials said they have also started negotiations with the British Museum to bring back 12 tabots. Tabots are replicas of the Ark of the Covenant that are sacred in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the world's oldest churches. The tabots were also taken in the aftermath of the Battle of Magdala. Spanish Coast Guard rescued 3 ships carrying migrants off the coast of Gran Canaria on Sunday night. The boats carrying 38, 36, and 48 people respectively, including 7 women and a little girl, were intercepted south of the Spanish island. All the migrants were safely transported to Aguinaguin port by authorities. More than 13,000 migrants have made the dangerous journey from West Africa to the Canaries archipelago between January and September 30th this year. According to the Spanish government data, more than double the number in the equivalent period in 2020. Gunmen killed a policeman and kidnapped 5 Chinese nationals near a mine in Southeast Democratic Republic of Congo overnight Saturday, according to a local official and an army spokesman. It was not clear who carried out the attack near the village of Mukera in South Kivu province. Relations are already strained between Chinese mining companies and local authorities who say some firms are operating illegally without licenses. A spokesperson at the Chinese embassy in Congo did not respond to a request for comment. The name of the mine site was not given. In August, the governor of South Kivu, Theo Kasi, suspended the operations of 6 more Chinese companies, ordering all local and foreign staff to leave the sites. People took to the streets of several European countries over the weekend to protest tighter coronavirus restrictions. As parts of the EU see record spiking cases, elected officials in some of those nations have begun limiting public life for the unvaccinated. VOA Arasha Basadi has more.
Carrying a banner that read "Together in Freedom," protesters marched through Belgium's capital Brussels Sunday against tightening measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. The crowd lobbed smoke bombs and firecrackers to protest moves such as barring unvaccinated people from bars and restaurants. Friday on the streets of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, protests turned violent as demonstrators torched police cars after the government announced plans for coronavirus lockdown measures like so-called corona passes that show proof of vaccination or recovery from infection. Police used water cannons and opened fire on the crowd in what the city's mayor called an orgy of violence. 5 police officers were injured there, with at least 28 people detained and some hospitalized with suspected gunshot wounds. By Saturday, fireworks became part of the mix as people protested a New Year's Eve fireworks ban to avoid putting added pressure on hospitals dealing with surges of COVID-19. Daily infection rates in the Netherlands remain at their highest since the start of the pandemic. Meanwhile, in Austria, where the daily COVID death rate recently tripled, roughly 35,000 people protested in Vienna following Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg's announcement that the entire population would have to be vaccinated by February. With roughly 2/3 of the population fully vaccinated, Austria has one of the lowest inoculation rates in all of Europe, so the government introduced a national lockdown. Protesters say they want their freedom back.
This has been going on for 2 years, and there's no end in sight. Something new is announced every day, and we don't know what we can believe anymore. That's the situation.
Austria's far-right Freedom Party organized the demonstration along with the anti-vaccine MFG Party and another far-right group. The Freedom Party leader was unable to attend after testing positive for COVID-19. Some Austrians say another lockdown was inevitable.
There's no other way, even though I don't like it. In literature, you can read that pandemics last at least 3 years, and we should avoid that.
At a news conference Friday in Berlin, Germany's acting health minister said hospitals were overflowing with COVID cases and may need to transfer patients to neighboring countries. Germany's head of infectious disease prevention said the COVID situation is out of control.
This is no longer about individual outbreaks. The whole of Germany is one big outbreak. This is a national emergency. We have to pull the emergency brake now. The thresholds have been exceeded.
As neighboring Austria prepares for a nationwide lockdown on Monday, German officials say they cannot rule out doing the same even for the vaccinated. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
We would like to know what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Kenyan ride-hailing company introduces electric bicycle rentals to curb air pollution. We'll have more on that. But first, here's Heidi Adams with what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me on the next Straight Talk Africa as we discuss the return of Africa's stolen art. France has repatriated 26 looted colonial-era artifacts to Benin. Now museums in Europe and the US are rethinking what to do with their African art collections. We'll speak to artists and museum curators about the colonial past of Africa's art and its future around the world. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back to Africa 54. As people in the United States prepare to gather for the Thanksgiving Day holiday, health authorities continue to push for vaccination to protect against COVID-19 and say all inoculated adults can get a booster shot. Michelle Quinn reports.
People are expected to travel at pre-pandemic levels this week as they visit loved ones for Thanksgiving, which kicks off the holiday season in the United States. COVID-19 infection rates are rising in the U.S., however, and health officials just endorsed all vaccinated adults receiving a booster shot. But gathering comes with risks, with 26% of Americans, including those 5 and older, yet to receive one shot, officials say.
If you're vaccinated, and hopefully you'll be boosted too, and your family is, you can enjoy a typical Thanksgiving meal, Thanksgiving holiday with your family. There's no reason not to do that. The thing we are concerned about is the people who are not vaccinated, because what they're doing is they're the major source of the dynamics of the infection in the community.
Some strategies to increase the vaccination rate are running into roadblocks. the Biden administration said it would pause, for now, plans to implement a workplace vaccine mandate for employers with 100 or more workers, pending a court challenge. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, signed a law imposing fines on businesses and hospitals that require inoculation against COVID-19 without alternatives. And Disney World, a big employer in the state, put its worker vaccination policy on hold.
And I think it's something that's going to make a big difference for an awful lot of people. We are respecting people's individual freedom in this state.
The Biden administration's efforts to tie employment with vaccination has become a political issue, some say.
Now it's become a political fight at a national level, unfortunately. You're going to see some governors trying to position themselves on this issue, like you've seen in Florida. And you're going to see the federal government, the Biden administration, now fighting those states.
While efforts to vaccinate more people continue, some are ready to loosen rules around mask wearing. The mayor of Washington, D.C. said the city's indoor mask mandate will be lifted this week. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
Concern over destructive wildfires in the western United States is driving a Seattle, Oregon-based company's quest for faster reforesting by using drones. Matt Dibble reports.
The future of forests may depend on some help from above.
We utilize heavy lift drone swarms to reforest by dropping seed vessels.
In 2015, Grant Canary founded Drone Seed, a company he says will speed up the process of regenerating forests by using drones.
We're on our best days about 6 times faster than existing tree planters.
Replanting has typically been done by crews carrying seedlings in heavy packs over difficult terrain.
The people who do it are superheroes, but to the extent that we're able to provide better tools for those same folks to be able to reforest faster, that's our objective with the drone swarms.
Speed is important because in some areas, it is a race to establish trees before competing species take over. But survival once the seeds hit the ground is still a challenge, and most will not grow into seedlings. Drone Seed has been perfecting its vessels, which are made of fibers that retain moisture. They also contain nutrients and even hot pepper to deter hungry creatures. The drones are programmed to locate the best planting locations.
We fly with an aircraft with LiDAR and multispectral imaging, and we create a 3D terrain map of what the site looks like. We pre-program all those flights, so it follows the terrain, it avoids the obstacles, but it also allows us to identify the places that seeds will establish the best.
With warmer and drier conditions around the globe, leading to more destructive wildfires, Canary says his company's mission is clear.
Make reforestation scalable to mitigate the worst effects of climate change.
Matt Dibble for VOA News, Oakland, California.
A Kenya ride-hailing company has introduced electric bicycle rentals for the first time in the capital, where air pollution and motor vehicle traffic are problems. Lenny Ruvaga reports from Nairobi.
Kamal Budhabati and his team of technicians inspect the latest iteration of an electric bicycle dubbed e-bike. For the past year, Budhabati, Chief Executive Officer at Little, the ride-hailing company behind the e-bike, has been perfecting the design and efficiency of the bicycles. When charged for 4 hours, they store enough electric charge for an entire day, giving cyclists an unlimited cycling range. Recently, the company had a soft launch to introduce the e-bikes to the public and gauge reaction. Budhabati says the inspiration behind this innovation was encouraging users to adopt green energy mobility.
I think, you see, the world is now recognizing that we need to change. And I think as a part of that, we feel that in whichever smaller way we can contribute to the effort that the world is making to make it a greener place. I think that's what we are doing.
The e-bikes cost about 50 cents for an hour. Access is granted by downloading the Little app on Google Play Store. Once this is done, a scanner on the app in conjunction with the client's mobile wallet unlocks the e-bike for a limited period. The e-bikes are also geo-locked, ready for the next user at defined collection points around the city. Kalua Green is the chairperson and founder of Green Africa Foundation, an organization that seeks to encourage sustainable environmental conservation in communities. Green says the move to embrace green energy mobility in the country, though timely, faces myriad hurdles.
The challenges vary from policy, the infrastructure, and also other activities like that are required by the government that have not been done. The need to have all this in place has not been done. Infrastructure, because our roads do not have in plan the accommodation of cyclists.
The United Nations Environment Programme in Kenya supports various initiatives encouraging adoption of green energy. Alexander Koerner is a program manager at UNEP. He says that an all-inclusive model targeting low-income countries, encouraging them to adopt clean energy mobility, ought to be in place.
Any sort of major achievement in decarbonizing or making the transport sector cleaner cannot work without the global south. And I think that's very important to understand. And I think from what I see and hear, that last COP was maybe a sort of an eye-opener to understand this, that in the transport sector, you really need to look at the low and middle-income countries.
Budabati and his team at Little are planning a mass rollout of the electric bicycles early next year in a bid to reduce carbon footprints and encourage clients to adopt green energy mobility. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Thank you, Lenny. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.